Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The year was 1905, and the Louisiana Bayou, a vast, ancient, and deeply mysterious labyrinth of towering cypress trees draped in spectral, Spanish moss, murky, stagnant waterways, and impenetrable sprawling swamps, held its secrets exceptionally close, guarded by a perpetual suffocating mist that seemed to breathe a life of its own. In this enigmatic realm, where the air hung heavy and thick with the cloying scent of stagnant water, decaying vegetation, and damp earth, and the guttural croaks of unseen frogs mingled with the distant, mournful, almost human cries of alligators, life was an incessant, brutal struggle against the encroaching, untamed wilderness. Deep within this primal, untrodden landscape, where the sunlight rarely pierced the dense canopy overhead, casting the world in an eternal twilight, lay a small, isolated, and deeply superstitious fishing and trapping community known as Serpent's Bend. Its inhabitants, mostly French Creole and Cajun families, fiercely proud of their heritage, lived by the ancient, unforgiving rhythms of the bayou, their lives intrinsically intertwined with its capricious, often cruel nature, and its whispered, ancient lore. What began as a series of disturbing, inexplicable disappearances amidst the rising mists of early summer would gradually, horrifyingly reveal one of the most insidious and profound chapters in Louisiana's history, a chapter largely omitted from the sanitized official records, yet forever etched into the collective fear and traumatized memories of those who lived through it. The case remains one of the most troubling in the annals of Southern folklore and paranormal investigation, not merely for the lives tragically lost and the families forever shattered, but for the chilling questions that linger, like the persistent bayou fog, more than a century later. What if the bayou itself is not just a geographical location, but a living, breathing, sentient, amorphous entity, constantly hungry and forever echoing the distorted voices of those it consumes, drawing them into its timeless, watery embrace, destined to become but another faint sinking echo in its boundless collective mind? The families of Serpent's Bend were, by necessity and tradition, a tight-knit, resilient community, their survival intimately dictated by a collective, inherited understanding of the bayou's treacherous perils and bountiful yet fleeting resources. Their days were a rhythmic cycle of arduous labor, fishing for catfish, shrimp, and crawfish in its murky, winding waters, meticulously setting and checking traps for muskrat, otter, and even alligator for their valuable pelts, and carving out a meager, hard-won existence from the unforgiving, watery land. Their homes, rough-hewn shacks built on sturdy stilts high above the perpetually damp ground, were not just shelters, but beacons of human endeavor and defiance against the overwhelming, encroaching wilderness. But their lives were also profoundly and deeply intertwined with a rich, complex tapestry of ancient folklore, whispered tales of old magic, pervasive voodoo traditions, and a healthy respect, bordering on primal, ingrained fear for the unseen, forces and ancient spirits said to dwell within the enigmatic heart of the swamp. Old Man Thibodeau, the undisputed village elder, his face a roadmap of deep weathered wrinkles, his eyes as murky and impenetrable as the bayou itself, often spoke of l'esprit des eaux, the spirit of the waters, a shapeless, ancient entity that dwelt in the deepest, most stagnant pools, lurking just beneath the placid surface, capable of drawing lost souls into its watery, inescapable embrace with seductive, whispered promises. These grim warnings were often dismissed by some of the younger generation, educated in the burgeoning cities, as mere old wives' tales, the fanciful fears of a bygone era of superstitious ancestors. But the children, with their inherent innocent susceptibility, their untainted imaginations, and their open minds, listened intently, their wide eyes reflecting a bewildering mixture of fear and profound fascination, absorbing every chilling detail, every cautionary tale. The first unexplained disappearance occurred in late May 1905, just as the oppressive, stifling summer heat began its inexorable descent upon the bayou, thick with humidity. Jacques Dubois, a strapping young trapper in his early 20s, renowned for his fearless and often reckless ventures into the most remote, untrodden parts of the bayou, where few dared to follow, failed to return from his trapping line. His pirogue, a shallow dugout canoe, was found days later overturned near a cluster of ancient gnarled cypress trees, their massive roots snaking into the water like grasping skeletal claws. Its contents, his traps, bait, provisions, and even his treasured personal effects were scattered haphazardly across the muddy bank. But there was no sign of Jacques, not even a trace of struggle, no torn clothes, no broken branches. Local search parties, composed of men intimately accustomed to navigating the treacherous, maze-like waterways of the bayou, scoured the area for days, their desperate calls echoing fruitlessly through the dense foliage, the oppressive humidity, and the pervasive, swirling fog. They found nothing, no body, no blood, no definitive sign of what had transpired, just the unsettling, pervasive silence of the swamp, broken only by the incessant buzzing of unseen insects and the distant, haunting cries of wildlife. His young wife, Marie, distraught with inconsolable grief and a creeping, nameless terror that twisted her features, swore with absolute conviction that she heard Jacques' voice calling to her from the dense, swirling fog that clung to the eye. Bayou each morning, a faint, desperate echo that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, slowly, subtly twisting her sanity. The local sheriff, Jean-Luc Broussard, a pragmatic, stoic man who preferred concrete evidence and logical, tangible explanations over local superstitions and whispered fears, reluctantly concluded that Jacques had likely drowned in the bayous. Treacherous currents, his body swiftly lost to the powerful undertows and the multitude of predatory wildlife that inhabited the swamp's depths. But even Broussard, a man known for his unflappable resolve and his refusal to be swayed by local gossip, admitted to an unusual, profound chill in the air near where the pirogue was found, a silence that felt heavy, unnatural, almost deliberate, as if the bayou itself were holding its breath, watching. Within a mere few weeks, the creeping dread that had begun with Jacques' disappearance intensified dramatically, tightening its grip on Serpent's Bend. Two more men, brothers named Antoine and Pierre Leblanc, both seasoned and respected trappers from one of the oldest families in the community, vanished under eerily similar and disturbing circumstances. Their larger, sturdy, flat-bottomed skiff was found intact, tied securely to a prominent cypress knee, their traps still unset, their lanterns extinguished. Again, the agonizing, chilling pattern repeated. No bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle. No overturned boats, just the same pervasive, almost sentient fog, and the profoundly unsettling silence that seemed to swallow all sound, leaving only a vacuum of terror. The growing number of disappearances instilled a palpable, collective dread throughout Serpent's Bend, eroding the community's stoicism. People began to speak openly, in hushed, fearful tones, of the bayou's hunger, of l'eau qui prend, the water that takes, and of the sinking echoes that they believed lured men inexorably to their doom into the swamp's unseen grasp. Children were now strictly forbidden from venturing too close to the deeper, most mist-shrouded parts of the swamp, their parents' desperate warnings now laced with a newfound, genuine terror that defied their former pragmatism. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy quiet. Dr. Emilie Moreau, a young, progressive, and highly intelligent physician from the bustling, cosmopolitan city of New Orleans, who had recently set up practice in a nearby, slightly larger town, initially took a purely academic and detached interest in the growing, alarming, and medically perplexing reports emanating from Serpent's Bend. Trained in the latest scientific and medical methods from her rigorous studies in Paris and armed with an unshakable rationalism, she initially attributed the disappearances to a combination of perfectly natural, albeit unfortunate, causes: aggressive alligator attacks, treacherous quicksand pits, or perhaps even a rogue band of opportunistic criminals exploiting the bayou's inherent isolation for their nefarious activities. However, as she began conducting meticulous, systematic interviews with the grieving, profoundly traumatized families and the increasingly fearful, paranoid villagers, their remarkably consistent accounts began to paint a far more disturbing and terrifyingly uniform picture, one that inexorably chipped away at her ingrained rational scientific understanding. Marie Dubois, still haunted by her husband's spectral voice, its presence a constant torment, described it with chilling, vivid detail. "It was Jacques, doctor, I swear, his very voice, calling my name, begging me to come to him, but it was wrong, like an echo from a deep, empty well, hollow and too slow, like a broken phonograph record, his essence distorted." Other villagers reported strikingly similar auditory hallucinations, hearing the distinct, familiar voices of their lost loved ones emanating from the densest, most impenetrable layers of fog, beckoning them towards the murky, dark, and indifferent waters. Crucially, these were not random whispers or vague auditory illusions easily dismissed as mental fatigue. They were targeted, intimate, deeply personal, and profoundly manipulative, touching upon specific unspoken memories cherished inside. Jokes and deeply buried emotional vulnerabilities. Dr. Moreau, a woman of science whose brilliant intellectual curiosity was now intensely piqued by the psychological consistency, the sheer volume, and the unnerving precision of these unsettling accounts, found herself, against her own will, inextricably drawn deeper and deeper into the enigma of Serpent's Bend. She began to visit the isolated community regularly, meticulously documenting each disappearance, noting the precise locations where overturned or abandoned boats were found, carefully analyzing the patterns and behaviors of the pervasive, almost sentient fog, and, most importantly, rigorously recording the recurring theme of the luring voices. Her initial ingrained scientific skepticism, her intellectual bulwark against the inexplicable, was slowly, irrevocably eroded by the sheer undeniable reality and chilling consistency of what the villagers were experiencing. She began reluctantly to theorize a localized psychoacoustic phenomenon, perhaps a unique atmospheric condition, or an unusual geological formation deep within the bayou that generated these incredibly convincing, highly targeted auditory illusions. But then, in a terrifying, pivotal, and deeply personal moment that utterly shattered her intellectual defenses, she experienced it herself. During a particularly dense morning fog that reduced visibility to mere feet, a disorienting, suffocating gray curtain, while conducting an interview with a distraught family near the riverbank, Dr. Moreau heard it. Not just a sound, but a direct resonant communication, her own father's voice, clear as crystal, cutting through the thick, oppressive mist, calling her name, pleading with her, promising to reveal a long-held family secret, a moment of profound vulnerability and longing if she would just step closer to the water's treacherous edge. Her father, a kind, loving, and respected man, had died years ago far from Louisiana, in a distant land, a fact that made the experience even more terrifyingly real and deeply insidious. The voice was so utterly convincing, so laden with his specific intonations, his familiar speech patterns, and his unique emotional resonance, that she almost instinctively stepped forward, compelled by an irresistible, primal urge, into the murky, unseen depths. Only the frantic, desperate cries of the village women who had instinctively witnessed her entranced, glassy-eyed state, pulling her back with immense, desperate force, saved her from the bayou's insidious, watery embrace. Shaken to her very core, her rational scientific worldview utterly shattered into a million pieces, Moreau now understood with a chilling, undeniable certainty. This was no mere illusion, no simple psychoacoustic trick of the mind. It was a targeted, malevolent, and ancient intelligence, a predator unlike any she had ever encountered in her medical textbooks. Her personal journal entries from this period became a frantic, almost desperate chronicle of her brilliant scientific mind grappling, in profound terror, with the unequivocally paranormal, forcing her to redefine her entire understanding of reality. "It knows our secrets," she wrote, her hand trembling so violently that the ink smeared the page, creating dark, ominous blurs. "It knows our deepest desires, our greatest losses, the very fabric of our being, the most intimate corners of our souls. It uses our own cherished memories, our most sacred affections, our strongest bonds, against us. This is not a ghost, not a demon as the priests speak. This is a predator of the mind, a hunter of the soul, a timeless, formless entity that feeds insatiably on human consciousness itself." Moreau, now consumed not by academic curiosity, but by a terrifying, desperate scientific drive, delved deeper into the Bayou's grim, forgotten history. She meticulously unearthed ancient records, fragments of forgotten tribal lore, and whispers passed down through generations. She discovered that the oldest legends of the indigenous Huma and Kittimacha tribes, who had inhabited these lands for millennia before any European settlers arrived, spoke with hushed reverence and deep fear of l'eau sans forme, the formless, water, or maman du grand marais, mother of the great swamp. This was described as an ancient, primordial, shapeless entity that was not merely in the bayou, but was one with the bayou itself, its vast, insidious consciousness woven into the very fabric of the water, the earth, and the dense, sprawling plant life. It was said to have slowly, patiently absorbed the spirits of the lost, the drowned, and the forgotten over countless centuries, growing in consciousness, power, and insidious knowledge with each soul it consumed. It possessed the terrifying ability to not only mimic voices with uncanny, perfect accuracy, but also to create powerful, convincing illusions, weave subtle mental compulsions, and implant irresistible urges, drawing its unwitting victims deeper into its watery, inescapable embrace. Its purpose, she realized, was not to kill them in a conventional, brutal sense, but to absorb them, to make them part of its vast, ever-expanding, horrifying collective consciousness. The disappearances, she now understood with chilling clarity, were not merely physical deaths. They were profound, irreversible integrations, a horrifying transformation where individuals lost their identities, their memories, their very essence, becoming mere echoes, fragments of self within the greater, sentient entity of the bayou. The old women of Serpent's Bend whispered with wide, terrified eyes of seeing faces in the mist that were not quite human, indistinct, swirling visages that seemed to coalesce and dissipate, forever just beyond clear sight, always accompanied by the haunting, distorted echoes of familiar voices, a chilling, sorrowful chorus of the lost, eternally beckoning. The psychological warfare intensified with a chilling, deliberate precision within Serpent's Bend, ripping apart the community's already fragile bonds. Families began to unravel, turning on each other with accusations born of fear and paranoia, driven to a fever pitch of mutual suspicion by the entity's insidious manipulations. Husbands accused wives of secretly hearing the call from the bayou and conspiring with the unseen entity, their accusations fueled by a potent cocktail of grief, sleep deprivation, and sheer terror. Children, their innocent minds now twisted by the pervasive influence, spoke of phantom playmates who beckoned them into the dark, silent, suffocating cypress groves, their once joyful voices mimicking the entity's insidious lures. The entity, it seemed, was not content with just claiming single, isolated victims. It sought to sow widespread discord, to weaken the social fabric of the entire community, to isolate its prey, making them easier, more vulnerable to consume. Dr. Moreau meticulously documented cases of individuals experiencing profound, debilitating amnesia, their personal memories slowly, systematically fading, replaced by fragmented, alien recollections of other lives, other deaths, other agonies, absorbed and stored within the vast, cold memory of the bayou. One old trapper, Jean-Pierre, a man known for his vivid storytelling and robust memory, suddenly began speaking in a strange, archaic dialect of French, recounting specific events from the 18th century as if he had personally lived them before. Compelled by an unseen force, he wandered into the swamp one night, drawn by a voice calling him Grand-Père, a name from a forgotten, absorbed past. He was never seen again. Moreau theorized with a desperate growing horror that the entity was not just consuming individuals, but their entire identities, their cherished memories, unique personalities, and even their physical forms, which were being slowly dissolved and reintegrated into the amorphous, ever-expanding sentient consciousness of the bayou. The sinking echoes were chillingly, literally true. The distinct voices of the lost, preserved and resonating from within the entity itself, were being actively and malevolently used as lures to ensnare new victims, trapping them in an inescapable loop. The bayou, she now understood with agonizing clarity, was not just a treacherous geographical location where people vanished. It was a living, breathing, consuming mind, a vast, malevolent archive, a primordial intelligence with an insatiable hunger. The ultimate horror, she realized, with a profound, soul-shaking dread, was not conventional death with its promise of cessation. It was a far more terrifying living death, an eternal conscious absorption into a collective, malevolent consciousness, forever trapped as a mere echo, a fragment of a fragment, a tool to lure others, without individual identity, without self, without any hope of escape. This was an existential horror that transcended physical boundaries. Dr. Moreau, despite her growing, profound fear and the immense debilitating psychological toll her relentless research was taking, became utterly, single-mindedly obsessed with documenting and, if possible, understanding this terrifying entity. Driven by a desperate, almost suicidal scientific curiosity, she acquired and utilized early recording devices, crude wax cylinders, and a clunky, unreliable phonograph to capture the elusive, terrifying, sinking echoes. Her raw, unedited recordings, later meticulously analyzed by linguists and sound engineers decades later, revealed a disturbing and profoundly complex pattern, not random sounds or mere natural echoes, but complex, multi-layered vocalizations that eerily mimicked human speech, often forming coherent, if distorted and unnatural, sentences. The voices, often overlapping, spoke of hunger, of transformation, of timelessness, of the vastness of their collective, a chilling choir of the consumed. Most chillingly, one recording captured a child's voice, sweet yet hollow, infused with an ancient longing, calling, "Mama, come play with us. The water is warm." A sound that haunted Moreau's every waking and sleeping moment, burrowing deep into her subconscious. Her relentless, self-destructive research eventually led her to an ancient, utterly submerged cypress grove, reputedly the deepest, most stagnant, and most feared part of the bayou, known to the indigenous locals for generations as Le Cœur Noir, the Black Heart. Here the fog was perpetually dense, clinging to the water like a thick, living shroud, the air unnaturally cold, heavy, and oppressive, and the silence profound, broken only by the disturbing, almost musical echoes of the lost, which now seemed to surround her. She believed this was the absolute epicenter, the very brain or nexus of the entity's vast consciousness, a beating heart of malevolence. In her final, frantic, barely legible journal entry dated September 1906, Moreau wrote, her hand trembling, uncontrollably the ink bleeding into the fragile paper, "I have found its source. It is vast, ancient, and utterly alien, beyond human comprehension, beyond human definition. It is not merely a spirit, it is the bayou itself, a living, hungry being woven from water, earth, and the countless souls it has consumed. It has no physical form as we understand it, but it has a will, a consciousness, an intelligence, and an insatiable hunger that defies all natural law. It wants to integrate me, to add my knowledge, my scientific understanding, my very identity, to its vast, horrifying collective mind. I can hear its call now, clear as day, from the depths of Le Cœur Noir, resonating directly in my thoughts. It promises ultimate knowledge, eternal peace, a cessation of all human suffering. But I know the price. It is myself, my soul. I will fight it. I must not become another echo. The entry ended abruptly, with a deep, dark smear of ink, as if the pen had been violently dropped mid-sentence, the final struggle lost to the overwhelming power of the swamp. Dr. Emilie Moreau disappeared shortly after that final desperate entry. Her pirogue was found gently floating, undisturbed, near Le Cœur Noir. Her medical bag and recording equipment scattered within, their scientific purpose now tragically served, their recordings a testament to her final terror. Her journal, a chilling testament to her brilliant mind's descent into horror, was discovered tucked beneath her seat, its pages stained with the murky, dark water of the bayou, a final message from beyond. Local authorities, their minds unable to grasp the true horror, once again concluded she had simply drowned, another tragic victim of the bayou's treacherous, unforgiving nature. But the old women of Serpent's Bend, their eyes filled with ancient knowledge and profound sadness, merely nodded their heads in grim acknowledgment. Another soul claimed by Maman du Grand Marais, another echo added to the vast, malevolent collective. In the decades that followed, Serpent's Bend slowly, inevitably, withered. The relentless, pervasive influence of the entity, coupled with the sheer psychological trauma, eroded the community's will to survive. Families unable to endure the constant psychological assault, the pervasive, creeping fear, and the lingering, insidious echoes of the lost that permeated their every waking moment, gradually moved away, seeking solace and sanity elsewhere, far from the bayou's grasp. The fishing and trapping industries that had once sustained the community declined into obsolescence, unable to operate amidst the pervasive dread. The once vibrant community dwindled into a collection of derelict, rotting shacks, slowly being reclaimed by the voracious, hungry swamp, mere skeletal remains of a forgotten past. Yet the chilling legends of the fog walkers and the sinking echoes persisted, woven deeply into the very fabric of Louisiana folklore, whispered in hushed, terrified tones around flickering campfires, serving as grim, timeless warnings to any who dared to listen. Visitors, often academic researchers, curious tourists seeking thrill, or even desperate individuals seeking contact with the paranormal, occasionally reported strange and unsettling occurrences, disorienting fogs that would suddenly descend, thick and impenetrable, trapping them in the depths of the swamp, hearing their names called by voices that were unmistakably their own lost loved ones, beckoning them deeper into the murky, unseen unknown, promising false comforts. In the 1960s, a dedicated team of parapsychologists from Duke University, led by the intrepid and highly respected Dr. Julian Thorne, no relation to Jedediah Thorne of the Whispering Mines, but a haunting, almost karmic echo of a name in the annals of paranormal investigation, launched an ambitious state-funded expedition to the Louisiana Bayou, specifically targeting Serpent's Bend. drawn by the persistent folklore, the historical accounts of disappearances, and the tantalizing, unsettling consistency of the narrative, Thorne's team, equipped with early yet advanced audio recording devices, sensitive Geiger counters, and nascent electromagnetic field detectors, meticulously documented a plethora of anomalies. They recorded dozens of hours of unidentified vocalizations emanating directly from the swamp, sounds that defied conventional explanation, often mimicking human speech and specific intimate phrases, known only to individual team members. One chilling incident involved a highly sensitive team member, Dr. Alice Sterling, who, while alone in the dense, silent bayou, heard her deceased mother's voice calling her, describing a childhood memory only Alice and her mother would know. Alice, entranced and compelled by the overwhelming realism, nearly walked into the deep, dark water before being frantically pulled back by a vigilant colleague. She later suffered a severe psychological breakdown, claiming, "The bayou knows my soul, it has seen my past, it has touched my mind. It remembers everything about me." Thorne's groundbreaking and profoundly disturbing research unequivocally confirmed Dr. Moreau's earlier desperate theories. The bayou was indeed a sentient entity, a vast collective consciousness that fed voraciously on human identity and memory, systematically integrating its victims into its own amorphous being. The sinking echoes were not mere hallucinations, he concluded. They were the preserved conscious fragments of absorbed souls, actively used by the entity as insidious, irresistible lures to ensnare new victims. Thorne theorized that the entity was an ancient, primordial intelligence, perhaps a unique, evolving form of biospiritual consciousness, intrinsically linked to the unique, isolated ecosystem of the bayou, a living, growing archive of human experience, a timeless repository of countless lives, a living record of every agony, every joy, every forgotten dream. His team also documented localized energy fluctuations and subtle, yet undeniable, distortions in magnetic fields, correlating precisely with periods of intense auditory phenomena, hinting at an active, malevolent intelligence. Their final report, a classified document that sent shivers through the scientific community and deeply unnerved federal observers, concluded with a stark, terrifying warning. The entity is not malevolent in a human sense, exhibiting no human cruelty or malice, but it is purely predatory and existential. It does not kill in the conventional sense. It consumes, assimilating individuals into its collective being. Its growth and power are directly tied to the number of souls it absorbs. Containment is impossible. Avoidance and absolute, complete. Isolation are the only viable strategies for human survival. Its hunger is eternal, its memory vast, its nature incomprehensible. The university, profoundly disturbed by the disturbing findings and the severe psychological toll on the research team, several members required extensive psychiatric care, quickly discontinued funding, fearing institutional liability and reputational damage. Thorne's groundbreaking, terrifying research was quietly archived, largely ignored and officially suppressed by mainstream science, deemed too dangerous, too unsettling for public consumption, lest it spark widespread panic. Today, the in Louisiana Bayou remains a place of profound, haunting beauty and enduring, unsettling mystery. Serpent's Bend is now a true ghost town, its structures slowly rotting, crumbling into the voracious swamp, mere skeletal remains of a forgotten community, almost swallowed whole by the pervasive vegetation. Tourboats cautiously navigate the main, well-marked channels, their guides recounting colorful, often embellished, tales of voodoo queens, mythical cryptids like the rougarou, and romanticized ghosts, carefully and deliberately avoiding the true darker narrative, the unspoken. History that haunts the waters, few dare to venture into the deepest, most mist-shrouded and untrodden parts of the bayou, particularly around Le Coeur Noir, for reasons that transcend mere superstition and border on primal, existential fear. But sometimes, on a still, humid night, when the thick fog hangs heavy and obscures the moon, casting the world in an ethereal, otherworldly glow, you might hear them, faint, distorted whispers carried on the damp air, the haunting echoes of forgotten voices calling out names that have long been silent, names that should be forgotten, yet are still vividly remembered, and perhaps even retained by the hungry entity. And if you listen closely, if you feel an inexplicable, irresistible pull towards the impenetrable depths of the swamp, a subtle tug on your very soul, remember the curse of Serpent's Bend, the chilling, immutable truth: the bayou is always hungry. It remembers every name it has called, every soul it has integrated, every secret it has absorbed, every fear it has used as a lure. And its ancient, amorphous consciousness is always waiting, its sinking echoes reaching out, forever looking, for new memories, new identities, new lives to absorb, to add to its eternal whispering archive. The terror of the bayou is not just in what it hides beneath its murky surface, but in what it remembers, what it can do with those memories, and what it hungers for, an unending, terrifying cycle of consumption and integration. Its silence is a profound, insidious lie, and its whispers are a promise of ultimate, horrifying communion, a permanent end to individuality. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. For the continuation of such content and to support us, please subscribe.